Languages. Pretty helpful when you want to communicate with other people. I still get a warm, fuzzy feeling when I think back to my time as a toddler learning my native language, German. Spending hours upon hours with my parents going over verb conjugations, learning the proper sentence order like subject, verb, object, and preparing flashcards days on end for each new word so I could memorize them. Fast forward to my teenage years, where I'd learned English as my second language, using all sorts of different tools like classes in school, textbooks, flashcards, all kinds of things. And at this point, I consider myself fairly good at English. But of course, I was kidding before when I said my parents were pounding grammar into me and forcing me to do flashcards as a baby. I learned my first language just like you learned yours, pretty much effortlessly, simply by existing in a world where the language is used. In fact, I think I am as good as I am in English simply because I started focusing on language immersion rather than going through textbooks until I was 30. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is John, and today we'll learn how we can acquire a language with immersion. In its simplest form, immersion is just consuming content in the language you want to learn, just like a little kid. This can include watching movies, listening to podcasts, reading books, and all these other things that are fun to consume. And in this video, we'll focus on how to immerse and a few things I've learned over the years so you don't have to make the same mistakes. First off, there are three types of immersion: active immersion, passive immersion, and white noising. Active immersion is when you consume content as your only activity with full focus. So for example, you sit down and watch a movie in the language you want to learn, but do nothing else. Passive immersion is when you consume content as your secondary activity, not giving it 100% focus. For example, you do some chores in the house or a workout and listen to a podcast in a language you want to learn while you're doing that. And white noising is when you have something on in the background, but don't really focus on it at all. This could, for example, be listening to a song in the language you want to learn while playing a video game with your friends. Active immersion will always be the most beneficial in terms of learning effect. But this shouldn't be a surprise, because when you focus on something, you usually take more information in. Passive immersion is a little worse in that regard, but it's awesome for a different reason, and that is that you can do much more of it. Those hours when you do your chores or do a workout or have your lunch break accumulate really quickly. Even if passive immersion isn't as impactful per minute spent as active immersion, you should still do as much of it as you can. White noising, on the other hand, is a bit controversial. Personally, I don't think you get much out of it, but if you enjoy listening to music in the language you want to learn, then by all means go for it. You may have noticed this as well, but music is often really difficult to understand because of the speed, or because artists stress the words in a really weird way to make them fit the beat. This makes it even harder to understand, which brings me to my next point. How difficult should the content you're consuming be? Or rather, does the content need to be comprehensible? Ideally, everything you consume is at an L+1 level, meaning L is your current level and the +1 makes it one step more difficult than your current level of comprehension. For example, when you read a sentence, you know about 8 or 9 words out of a 10-word sentence. This way you understand what's going on in general, but still learn something new. Of course, like most things in life, finding something that's ideal is very difficult. There will be plenty of L+1 content for the level that you're at in a language you want to learn, but it's highly likely that it will not interest you or outright bore you. Especially at the lower beginner level, the content is usually geared towards preschool kids and school kids and so forth. Forcing myself to consume the ideal L+1 content that I don't enjoy never really worked for me. I tend to zone out or look at the ceiling or look at the clock, wondering when I can finally allow myself to stop. It is definitely possible, but I prefer a slightly different approach. In the beginning of learning a new language, I like to get a small foundation, as in the most used words, into my head first. For example, with flashcards. Then I slowly ramp up the immersion with content I enjoy, rather than forcing myself through too many children's stories. This is arguably a little less effective in terms of acquiring new words, but it's my preferred method. If I have to endure the boring stuff anyway, may as well learn the words with single sentence cards, which is a little more efficient in my mind. Either way you do it, you definitely need a little bit of tenacity in the beginning, but immersion gets a lot easier and also more fun the better you get. And I also think you shouldn't be afraid to flip through a textbook or go through a grammar guide if that gets you to your comfortable L+1 level just a little bit quicker. And on the topic of books, I do think there's a difference in comprehensibility between different media, as in text, audio, and video. Video has a massive advantage over the other two, unless it's some sort of comic book or manga, in that it visualizes the information. For example, let's do a little bit of German immersion. Das ist ein Apfel. You may have just realized, without needing a translation, that I've just told you the German word for apple. Übrigens, der Apfel ist ein Sweet Tango und schmeckt deliziös. Anyway, most of the time, video will be slightly more comprehensible than audio or text without images. Also, I can almost guarantee you that the content you're interested in will be slightly more difficult than your current L+1 level, at least in the beginning. So how often should you look up words when you don't know something? As I said, you do need a bit of tenacity in the beginning. It can definitely get a bit tedious when it takes you half an hour to go through a page in a book or a 10-minute YouTube video. How often you should look something up is kind of up to you, in my opinion. And this is because at the end of the day, you should enjoy your immersion. Looking up less will enable you to go through more content quicker, which exposes you to more of your target language. And this will definitely improve your comprehension. Personally, I look up most of everything, including words and grammar constructs, when I do active immersion. That's usually reading, watching a video, or watching a series. But when I do passive immersion, which in my case is mostly listening to podcasts, then I don't look up almost anything. Very rarely, I will take out my phone in the gym and will look up a word that I've heard during a workout that I couldn't understand, or I've heard multiple times already and I was like, oh, I'm interested in this word. 9 times out of 10, I just ignore. I usually listen to the same content a few times anyway, so words that I didn't know become clearer through context with the second or third run through. I also often take the time to sit down and actively listen to something that I've listened to in the gym or during cooking or whatever that just was too difficult for me to understand or had many words that I didn't know. This is simply to get more out of it. I don't think you have to do this, but I feel like if you've already put in the time into a piece of content, you understood most of it, but there are like a few words that you didn't know. It might help to just actively listen to that and look up all the words that you didn't know. In my opinion, repeating content is generally a good thing because you notice different words and different things when you go through it multiple times. You probably know how this works from rewatching some movies. But if you are repeating content so often that you get bored and you zone out, you should probably stop, even if there are many words that you still don't understand. If the content isn't engaging you, it is significantly harder to stay focused and acquire anything from it. So what content should you consume? To be honest, this is the million-dollar question. No matter what anybody tells you, you need to find content that you find interesting. And this is probably the hardest part about immersion. And considering the sheer amount of free content on the internet, it is actually not that hard. Think about what you're interested in, like history. Read books and watch videos from native speakers about their country's history. Like DIY content, find something on YouTube from a native speaker who does that. Like sitcoms, watch Friends in Spanish.
¿Qué rayos fue eso?
Una lección de la importancia del unagi.
You get the gist. As I said before, videos tend to be just slightly more comprehensible, so I would focus on that. But make sure to always either watch with subtitles in the language you want to learn, or no subtitles at all. You may have just noticed in the Spanish Friends video that your eyes instantly focus on what you know, in this case the English subtitles, and the rest of the language tends to become noise. Turning on subtitles in your native tongue can actually eliminate a big portion of the beneficial effect from your language immersion. With that, happy immersing, like and subscribe if you found this helpful. Peace.